In 1999, Europe attempted something no civilization had ever tried before. 11 nations with different histories, rivalries, and economic strengths surrendered their currencies for one shared promise. They believed a single unit of money would bind the continent together so tightly that conflict would become unthinkable. The euro was not sold as policy. It was sold as destiny. Politicians raised glasses. Economists applauded. Citizens were told prosperity would follow unity. But beneath the ceremony, a handful of economists issued a warning so specific it now reads like a script of the future. They said the currency would empower the strong and suffocate the weak. They said it would remove the escape valves nations rely on in crisis. They said when the first real shock arrived, the consequences would not be technical, they would be human. Few listened. To understand why, you must first understand the motive. The euro was born from fear. Twice in the 20th century, Europe tore itself apart. Cities were reduced to ash. Entire generations vanished. Leaders became obsessed with one idea. If nations trade together, invest together, and share a currency, they will never fight each other again. Economic interdependence would replace rivalry. The theory was not irrational. Integration did bring peace. But somewhere along the way, the political dream outran the economic math. Designing a currency requires discipline. It requires alignment of productivity, wages, mobility, and fiscal power. Europe did not have that alignment. Germany was an export powerhouse built on industrial precision and wage restraint. Italy, Greece, Spain, and Portugal were more fragile, more indebted, more dependent on domestic demand. Yet all would share one interest rate, one central bank, one monetary policy. If Germany overheated and needed tighter policy while Italy stagnated and needed stimulus, there would be no compromise. The European Central Bank would choose one setting. Someone would absorb the pain. This was not obscure theory. Decades earlier, economists had outlined the conditions for a successful currency union. Labor must move easily across regions. Wages must adjust quickly to shocks. A central treasury must transfer resources from strong areas to weak ones. Europe had limited labor mobility. Languages and regulations formed barriers. Wages were protected by rigid labor structures, and there was no unified fiscal authority capable of large-scale redistribution. The foundations were incomplete. The launch proceeded anyway. At first, the results felt miraculous. Interest rates across southern Europe collapsed to levels once reserved for Germany. Cheap money flowed, credit expanded. Housing markets surged in Spain. Banks in Ireland grew to multiples of national output. Governments borrowed at rates that seemed almost charitable. For a while, growth masked imbalance. But low rates that were comfortable for Germany were intoxicating for weaker economies. Debt accumulated silently. The euro created an illusion that risk had vanished because everyone shared the same currency. Then came the global financial crisis. Confidence evaporated. Investors suddenly distinguished between German debt and Greek debt. Borrowing costs diverged violently. And here the design flaw revealed itself. Before the euro, a struggling nation could devalue its currency. A cheaper currency made exports competitive and softened recession. It was painful, but it was an adjustment valve. Inside the euro, that valve was sealed shut. Greece could not devalue, it could only compress internally. Wages fell. Pensions were cut. Public services shrank. Unemployment soared above 25%. Young people left. An entire generation watched opportunity evaporate. The economy contracted by a quarter. Debt paradoxically became heavier as output collapsed. The cure deepened the wound. Other southern economies endured variations of the same pressure. Spain suffered mass joblessness. Portugal stagnated. Italy drifted for decades with near-zero productivity growth. Meanwhile, Germany benefited from a currency weaker than its old mark would have been. Exports flourished. Trade surpluses expanded. The imbalance widened. And yet exit remained unthinkable. Leaving would mean immediate devaluation, bank runs, legal chaos. So countries endured adjustment without autonomy. The economic strain soon became political strain. When interest rates were set in Frankfurt, voters in Rome or Athens had no mechanism to alter them. The central bank was insulated from direct democratic control. National governments absorbed public anger for policies they did not fully command. Populist movements gained momentum. Centrist parties weakened. Elections turned volatile. The euro had removed monetary sovereignty, but had not replaced it with full political union. It was integration without completion. During the worst moments of crisis, another dilemma emerged. If a member state could not repay its debts, who would bear the loss? Allow default and risk contagion across the banking system? Or intervene with rescue packages funded by taxpayers? Europe chose intervention. But the rescues came with conditions. Austerity became the price of support. Banks were stabilized. Citizens absorbed contraction. Losses were redistributed across borders in complex ways few voters understood. Trust eroded. And still the system survived. Not because its design was flawless, but because political will held it together. Each crisis was met with new tools, bond-buying programs, emergency facilities, creative interpretations of mandates. The euro adapted, but always reactively. Today, the structural questions remain. Can a currency union endure indefinitely without deeper fiscal integration? Will stronger economies permanently underwrite weaker ones? Will voters consent to that arrangement? Or will the next severe shock force a reckoning? The euro has lasted longer than many critics predicted. It has also imposed costs its architects underestimated. Peace has endured. Prosperity has been uneven. The experiment continues. Money is not merely a medium of exchange. It is power, it is flexibility, it is sovereignty. When nations surrender it, they trade control for cohesion. Whether that trade proves wise depends not on hope, but on resilience under pressure. History teaches a simple lesson. Systems built on compromise can survive for decades, but unresolved tensions do not disappear. They accumulate quietly beneath stability. The question is not whether Europe desired unity. It did. The question is whether unity built on incomplete foundations can withstand the next storm. Because when the next crisis arrives, and it always does, the euro will once again reveal whether it is a permanent pillar of Europe's future or an ambitious experiment still searching for equilibrium.